Have you ever walked out of Applebee's only to find a moose hanging out by your car, making it impossible for you to move? Rude, right? Have you ever been snowballing? It's like bowling, but with snow. Have you ever seen a bunch of grown adults purposefully running with reindeer? Well, actually, they were being chased, but you get the picture. If you answered no to all of these questions, then you've clearly never lived in the last frontier, Alaska. My cultural artifact is this plaque, which was presented to me after working for 1 year in Anchorage Airport. But before we go into those adventures, let's back up a little bit. A long time ago, in a land far, far away, known as Huntington Park, California, there was a young 13-year-old me living with my parents, enjoying the last year that I would have with no responsibilities. I was living with my mom and my dad and my two older sisters. My mom, being a very typical Mexican mom, would never let my sisters go out without their annoying little sister right by their side, just to make sure they were on their best behavior. Well, the boys that my sisters went out with were not exactly the cream of the crop, if you know what I mean. So they would usually bribe me with candy or stuffed animals. Eventually, they moved on to having their friends come along to distract me. And boy, did I get distracted. It all sounds like fun and games, right? Until the 13-year-old gets knocked up. And so ended my childhood and began the rest of my life. About the ninth grade, I dropped out and decided school was no longer for me. I went back and got my GED eventually when I was 19, but at this point, I had already moved out of my parents' house and moved in with my second baby daddy, who I eventually married. Not my wisest choice. We had a very tumultuous relationship with a lot of knockdown, drag out fights. And finally, at about the age of 20, I gained some wisdom and some courage, and I left that relationship. Moved back in with my parents and got a job with TSA. Life was going all right, and then my parents decided to move to Arizona. So I took my boys, Anthony and Cyrus, and I moved into our very own apartment. A couple of years later, I met my third baby daddy and my second husband. That marriage is still going strong, so we're okay there. We blended our families together. He had a daughter, I had my two boys. We moved in together, and life was good at home and at work. But when we had a bouncing baby boy named Joseph. Joseph was about 4 or 5 years old when my career was kind of at a standstill at LAX. So, in order to get some experience on interviewing, I decided to apply to any job that I could find in the entire nation. One hot summer afternoon, I get a phone call from the head honcho at Anchorage Airport. He asks me a couple of questions for a few minutes, and I'm thinking he's just vetting me until he decides if I get a final interview. By the end of that 30-minute conversation, he tells me that he wants me to move to Anchorage and if I'm willing to take the job. I was shocked. What could I say? I hesitantly approached the subject and spoke to my husband about it. He thought I was kidding when I said I really wanted to do it. So we had a lot of really loud, not child-friendly discussions about the topic. But if there's one thing my husband knew about me was that once I set my mind to something, I was going to do it. So I packed 2 very large suitcases. I went to the airport, flew into Anchorage with just my 2 suitcases, no car, no place to live, and not knowing anybody within 2,000 miles. My first night I spent in a motel that I wouldn't recommend to my worst enemy. I had to use my suitcases propped up against the door for my own safety. Day number 1, I got a place to live because I wasn't going back to that motel. Day number 2, I got myself a car because I can't ride the moose to work. And day number 3, I started my career at Anchorage Airport. I spent exactly 1 year there, where was the most fulfilling year of my work life. And at the age of 33, for the first time in my life, I lived alone. It was a very scary time. It was a very exciting time. I missed my husband, I missed my kids, but I gained so much strength and I learned so much about myself. So after a year of being there, I decided it was time to move on, and I moved over to Phoenix Airport. But before I left, I was presented with this awesome plaque because my team was so sad to see me go, and I was sad to leave them. But I knew it was time for me to get back to my family. I had an awesome adventure while I was there with those moose and crazy people running with reindeer. But what I gained most from there, and what I still hold true to me today, and why this plaque is so important to me, is that it reminds me that even though I'm a high school dropout with a ninth grade education, I am truly unstoppable when I set my mind to something. Thanks for listening.